Okay, we're recording. Can you hear me? Check. Check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah! All right. I think you can hear me. I think you can hear me. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Can you hear me? I think you can. And so what have we here? Do you guys like my memes? I like this one. I'm convinced that Papa Hemingway is one of my guides, actually. It just came to me. Well, it came to me a couple of years ago, and then I forgot. I was like, who was that other guide? Because I know George Carlin's one of my guides. I know Bob Marley's one of my guides. So, yeah, I love this quote by Papa, and I do think it goes very well with Enter Sandman. Go all the way with it. Do not back off. For once, go all the goddamn way with what matters. I like it. So I thought I would share it. And if you like memes like I do too, I like my memes. And so be sure to check out my Telegram feed if you're into loud Ernest Hemingway memes with Metallica playing in the background. Yeah, and I'm all geared up for sound and video because I'm going to be doing a presentation. I have some prepared materials that I'm looking forward to sharing on the subject of Operation Mockingbird, and how that's sort of being rolled out on us, deployed on us still, to this day. And so I put together a presentation in response to the Billy Carson incident that unfolded some time ago. And just as a demonstration of how they sort of roll out these bad ideas or these ideas that undermine us, right? I refer to them at times as sort of a false premise, right? They base an entire argument on a false premise, but what they do is they set up the premise. The premise is the pivot point. The premise is the cause and effect. The causal relationship sort of gets shifted into gear with these false premises that they use these Trojan horses to just sort of parade out under false pretenses, right? So the false pretense in the Rogan interview with Huff is that, they're all there to talk about Christian history, the history of Christianity and the history and historical context of languages and all this stuff and, cuneiform and the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sort of secondary to that is sort of assassinating the character of Billy Carson live or, on air of the Joe Rogan show. But there's actually a third raison d'etre or modus operandi behind this particular show that I caught, and it just got my goat. And so I sat down and made a presentation out of it. And so what I'm going to be pointing out is this, understanding that I believe is sort of growing in its, I won't call it popularity, but there is the awareness, that we, some of these less, well, we'll just call them non-mainstream, right? These alternative media sources aren't really all that alternative either. And when you think about it, they got off television, the Nielsen platform, the ratings, so that they could learn more about us, so that they could track us more closely. I always am beating the drum that this is a focus group, right? This is what I mean, right? You get better stats off your viewership online because it's infinitely more trackable. The analytics are that much more rich. I mean, just about everything about the people who are watching you, everything they've ever done online, every time they interact with you. So the amount of data that they're collecting about us is unimaginable with these algorithms that they have running. And that's why they're pulling us onto the internet and off of television. And rather than sort of explain it myself, I've stumbled across an interesting resource on X, the just.a.thought account at _GALV. And she puts it perfectly, and I don't really see the need to expound or change anything that she wrote, and so I figured I'd just go ahead and read it. And so the Joe Rogan Experience is a present-day example of Operation Mockingbird. It is a tool of the state intelligence presented to the masses as the podcast of a down-to-earth dude just asking some questions. Its purpose is to manage the image of characters on the world stage, release disclosures, controlled narratives, and counter-narratives, and manipulate the minds of millions. Joe Rogan has 19 million subscribers as of this recording. The MSM went under controlled demolition years ago to herd its viewers into other forms of media which can be further surveilled, tracked. But the owners never changed, and the goal remained the same as always: control the population. We are only allowed to see what those owners want us to see, so that we think what they want us to think. And I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, no need to go any further than that. These are very well written, well thought words. These are, and that's it in a nutshell. But how, right? How do they do it? And so I've put together a presentation that we'll get to. But first I want to do some of the spiritual stuff, the really important stuff. And so stick around and we'll get to that. But I want to talk about a little astrology real quick. In case you didn't know, if you felt a shift back on the 11th or around the time of the 11th, or if you've been feeling a little differently since the 11th of January, back on the 11th, the lunar nodes shifted from the Aries Libra axis to the Pisces Virgo axis. And so in astrology, the North Node, or Rahu, represents life lessons and growth, pointing to future karmic paths. Whereas the South Node, or Ketu, reflects past experiences, talents, and comfort zones we should move away from to evolve. So breaking sort of out of stagnation. That's the South Node. And the North Node is life lessons and growth, pointing to future karmic paths. And so back on the 11th, the lunar nodes shifted, right? The North and South nodes shifted from Aries and Libra and into Pisces and Virgo, which for me was a huge relief, because I'm actually part of the Chiron in Aries generation. And maybe if you are too, you felt it. And the Chiron and Aries generation was born between 1968, April of 68, and May of 76, technically. But I would just say 68 and 76. And so the Chiron and Aries generation deals with themes of identity, self-assertion, and healing through a pioneering spirit. Chiron, known as the wounded healer, in Aries, the sign of self, signifies a collective wound related to identity and courage. And so the Chiron and Aries generation often struggles with asserting individuality while healing from the fear of being themselves. And so their journey involves learning to embrace personal desires and leadership qualities. So the hero's journey, right? The journey to becoming able to embrace my personal desires and then share them, become a leader, right? Turning personal pain into empowerment, get out of here, and teaching others to do the same through courage and authenticity. Wow. I mean, I read this yesterday, but every time I read it, it just blows me away. And so the Chiron and Aries generation, right, what I'm part of, is about teaching others to do the same, embrace personal desires, leadership qualities, turning personal pain into empowerment, and teaching others to do the same through courage and authenticity. And so I felt this nodal shift. And to me, it feels like we've turned a corner. The emphasis is going to shift. We can already see the karma coming back around. You know, we see the karmic boomerang effect in full swing. You know, we can see the hand of God everywhere right now. I don't want to get too into it because there are a lot of people suffering, and my heart goes out to everyone who's not having a good time of it right now. Growth is painful. It sucks. Believe me, I know. But as we reclaim our power from old situations that took advantage of us, right? During an age when taking advantage of others was the economy, right? We were in an economy of taking advantage of each other's in situations. We're seeing sort of the supply of victims necessary to be a perpetrator dry up. Like, that's the thing about being in a society of perpetrators, is perpetrators need victims, but as the victims sort of get wise to the shenanigans, the supply of victims dries up, and therefore the stock and trade of the perpetrators go away, because if you're a perpetrator, you need to have a victim. And so as we do this, we're leaving this era of perpetrators, and we're entering the era of innocence, right? Where the motives of perpetrators are removed. There's not going to be any good reason to do harm to others anymore. Those motivations are being removed. That's what I'm seeing. At the highest levels, what's being dismantled are motivations, right? That's what this has all been about. That's what personal growth is about. That's what changing who you are is all about. That's what my personal growth journey was. It was about changing my motivations. What motivated me? If you read my book, you know, when I first started in Law of Attraction back in 2010, all I wanted to manifest were things, items, right? I've quickly learned that you can get everything on your vision board and still be miserable. And you've heard me talk about that, right? It's not about acquiring things. And so my motivations personally shifted once I got healed. You know, once I recovered my true self bit by bit, reparented myself, you know, became emotionally sober, healed my body, my gut. My motivations have shifted. I don't want the same things. I still want to manifest. I can't help it. I'm a person. That's what people do. Or I should say I'm a human being. I'm a natural, sovereign, man, not a person. That's what we do. We are manifestors. We're perpetually manifesting. We are never not manifesting. So to say we're manifesting is a little sort of slippery in and of itself. But the point is, my motivations have shifted. I'm no longer trying to manifest stuff. Okay. What I want to manifest now are core beliefs. I want to manifest who I am, right? I want to manifest belief systems. So I want to manifest peace. I want to manifest compassion. I want to manifest critical thinking. You know, I want to manifest an era of justice and fairness and peace, you know, and human sovereignty, you know, the sovereignty, personal sovereignty of the individual. So these are concepts. These aren't things, right? And this is what I'm talking about by shifting motivations. The motivations of all are shifting, and more as we let go, right, of stuff and things, you know, and our motivations shift. What can be used to move us around the chessboard? What motivations, what promptings, right? Because everything is cause and effect. Like if you sort of, you know, freak them out about this, then they're going to run off and go do that. You know, if you send the fear of God in them about this, then they're going to go do that. If you tell them that it's going to, you know, be really bad for them, if you do this, then they'll go do that. That is cause and effect. Just like the Merovingian was talking about in the Matrix, right?
You are here because you were sent here. You were told to come here and then you obeyed. It is, of course, the way of all things. You see, there is only one constant, one universal. It is the only real truth. Causality. Action, reaction, cause and effect.
Everything begins with choice.
No, wrong. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
Everything is cause and effect. And so we're kind of like looking back at the Merovingian right now and delivering that famous line, "What's it going to be, Merv?" Because we're watching them shift the motivations on us. Like, what are you going to try and do now? But it's cause and effect. And so have to keep an eye on what they're trying to sort of steer us in the direction of. And this is why I want to show you exactly how they do it. Like I want to show you a case study on how they do it so that we can hold fast to to what motivates us as sovereign individuals and resist any of these Trojan horse motivations that they try and sneak in under the cover of darkness, unbeknownst to us as we watch what we think is a podcast about the historical accuracy of Christian literature, right? And the historical origins of language. And then, indirectly, we're watching the assassination of Billy Carson's character unfold. But as our motivations continue to shift, we're also going to be able to understand what success looks like and what success ought not to look like. Like if you're claiming to be a Christian historian, right? Are you successful if you have successfully overtaken, the guy who was sort of occupying that role before you, Billy Carson, who's sort of, the narrative would suggest that Carson's kind of like a carpetbagger. And this guy comes in and just cleans up the situation, right? But is dancing, doing a touchdown celebration after you take out Carson's character on the Joe Rogan show really what Christians ought to be up to? I mean, are you setting a positive example of Christianity, right? And so what success really looks like and those who embody success, this is changing, right? You can't say you're a Christian scholar and then eviscerate someone and murder their character in front of 4 million people. Those just don't go. That's not success, right? And so as these shills, try and convince us or try to motivate us, right? And we become more and more aware of what they're trying to foist upon us, it doesn't work anymore. And so the net is the motivation shift. And so what we're seeing as we get healthier and healthier and therefore stronger and stronger is that this has always been a marathon, right? It is a waiting game. The light has had to outlast the darkness. We've had to just keep going because eventually, right, that's what we see when we see the motivation shifting. When we change the cause, we get a different effect. Cause and effect, it also applies to the relationship between how the darkness is perpetuated, right? This is why we have to outlast the darkness because they will disappear. The darkness will disappear without our attention. And so what ultimately separates those who are driven by dark motives and those who are driven by healthy motives is health itself. And so if we borrow from the dark crystal, it was always about outlasting the other in the dark crystal. The Skeksis had to outlast the light, and we see in gory detail at times, how rotten the Skeksis actually were, at 1,000 years old, stealing and pillaging and getting away with God knows what for 1,000 years turns you into a pretty sickening looking being, and we see these sick looking beings around us. We know who they are. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to get in that kind of trouble. But That's why you've heard me say, actually, a person's appearance can say a lot about that, what's going on inside of that person. As within, so without. So when we apply that to the Skeksis who embody the darkness, they're trying to outlast the light. And that was the big thing about the dark crystal, right? They couldn't outlast the light unless they stole from the light. And so they needed the light to outlast the light. And that is not a very good business plan. That's not a very good long-term strategy. That's eventually not going to work out in the end. And that's sort of what we're seeing now, are the limitations of this finite strategy of just stealing from the light, right? But they were siphoning off light so that the darkness itself could survive. And what did we see in the dark crystal? Well, for a while, the light will put up with this. We'll put up with it for a while. We don't want anyone to suffer, right? And so we felt sympathy for these Forsaken, and we sort of lent them our power, like the Gelflings did. They were like, we'll worship you. We'll be the ones who worship you. Like, you guys are really ugly, and it looks like it's hard to be you. And so, sure. Like, you guys want to, have power and, run the administration while we run around having a blast being Gelflings? Fine. You can have it. Right? But what did they do? They perverted that, right? Same with Agra. You guys want to do all this boring administrative stuff? That's what politics is supposed to be. Boring administration. You want to do all this while I go explore the stars? Be my guest. And so they took it. And they kept it until Agra came back, and, the Gelflings sort of realized what was going on. And during that awakening process, right, the Gelflings uncovered the truth. They uncovered the dark motivations of the Skeksis. And so here we are, right? But it ultimately came back to motives. What was driving all this? What's driving people? Do you remember when Fear Factor, for instance, and reality television hit the scene in 2000? And Paris Hilton and the Bush II administration, and the focus of materialism hit full speed. That's when this hyper-materialistic mindset was uploaded into the operating system. And so as we look around, and we see top influencers and those who are sort of being propped up as shining examples for the rest of us to follow, right? These flawed archetypes that are hell-bent on bringing us back to where we're leaving, right? We are in the process of leaving the matrix, but they've got this 95% true phenomenon they use, and I'm going to show it to you in just a minute, that I've discussed, in the past, where it's a straight line, but with a slight, busted wheel. And so it's, instead of a straight line, it's just it's on a 2% axis. And, and over time, that 2% arc, it's a long arc. It is a long arc, 25-year plan, right? Like the Russian PSYOP specialist said. It's a 25-year plan, but it will come back around eventually. And we'll be back here 25 years from now, deciding that, in fact, it's the blue team that we should have put all our faith in, not the red team. And they just keep switching back and forth. Ideological ping pong. But this is how they do it, okay? And I think this is why they're showing it to us. I think at some level, everybody who's involved in this it's a teaching exercise. So I'm not going to point the finger of blame at anyone. I'm not going to call anyone a bad person. I'm just going to point out the truth, right? If you're a Christian scholar, is dancing on the grave of a dead man's character that you just assassinated in front of 4.5 million people really that Christian of you? Is that what Jesus would do, Wes? And hey, you're well within, your right to come back to me and say, well, I'm a biblical scholar. That doesn't mean I'm a practicing Christian or a well-practicing Christian. It just means that I know the difference between ancient Sumerian and cuneiform. And I'll give you that. But I did actually go to Bible school. I went to Bible college for 2 years. one of the ways I got back into getting a degree after getting myself thrown out of high school was to go to a junior college and play football for 2 seasons. And they were a Christian college here on the East Coast that basically wanted me to play ball for them. And in return, all I had to do was show up and get some credits. And then I transferred, to a university after that. But I played football at a Bible college in North Carolina for 2 years. And I had Bible scholars as professors. And these guys, are just like our friend Wes Huff. They're biblical scholars, theologians. And these guys, I loved my theology classes because of the countenance of these men. They were scholarly, but they were Christians of the most pure. The energy around these guys, I just wanted to be around them all the time. I loved studying theology because of their names. And I love them so much, I won't say their names, but I remember them, and I remember their faces. And they had the best energy. They were the embodiment of Christ consciousness, if you ask me. They had a glow about them, a humility. They were their brains. They were the smartest men I've ever met, but they were the most humble, gentle, sweetest men I've ever known. And those guys, now they were a step in the right direction for Christianity, if you ask me. But what people are saying about this, And so what we're seeing, and what I want to share in a little bit is this process of how they create a controlled counter-narrative, right, to continue the process of manipulating our mind. In the words of our friend, Just a Thought, right, this is how they do it. And I've never really been able to figure out why anyone would want to give up on being human. When a lot of my friends got back from going to Virginia Tech, it was like they'd all been sort of brainwashed and became this crowd. They were all very into reality television when it came out. We were susceptible to that. Reality television came out 25 years ago. We were all 25 years ago. And they had all just gotten back from college and they were falling for it. And I remember just being so pissed that they would all just gather on the couch to watch Fear Factor or whatever they were watching. I don't even remember, Survivor. And I would just leave. I would go, and they would be there drinking and partying and watching this reality television. I would just know that they were being brainwashed, and I would just run and go for a run. I'll be back in 4 hours, 5 hours. I hope none of you are here when I get back. That was my attitude towards all this. I was never about following what a crowd who is lost follows. That was my cue to go in the opposite direction, and I did. And so I guess I'm still, I got a little mad at my friends for falling for it. I get bitter at people for falling for this crap because we had it so much better. Nothing feels better than being alive and healthy. And that's what we used to be. That's what we ought to be. Nothing feels better than your health. When you get your health back, I've said it, in my world many, many times, your whole life that's the best day of your life when you get your health back. If you're battling something and you get your health back, it's the best day of your life. And so these guys who are shaming us for not spending enough of our lives making money, running on the wheel, stressing ourselves out, ruining our health, right? You see them, they're not healthy. They all have one thing in common. They have these big, giant livers, okay, that are more broad than their shoulders. They look weird. It's like they're carrying babies in their stomachs, these men. And it's because they have fatty liver disease, which is the result of sort of sedating yourself with a toxin known as alcohol. Alcohol, food, all this garbage that you have to put into your body to kill your health so that you can maintain this mindset, right? This motivation of materialism, right? You ruin your health. But if you don't have what we have as a human, you don't care about your health. Okay? If you're not blessed with a divine human spirit, you are the essence of creation, if you're not blessed with being a natural human, sovereign human, then you don't value health as much as we do, right? And so these guys who are shaming us and getting us on the wheel and who expect us to sacrifice our health so that we can be part of their club, they don't really care about health as much as they care about other things. But I am here to remind you that health is always the most important thing. And that's, why they largely try to control where we're getting our information from institutions, right? Because this institutional mindset represent what's at the core of being free. Don't listen to your body. Listen to the institution. Don't listen to your health. Listen to what this guy tells you to do. Don't trust your discernment. Don't trust what cause and effect is taught you. Trust what I tell you instead. And I think this institutional agenda is an anti-human agenda. I think it's pro-institution and anti-human because, again, what is the most valuable thing? Is money the most valuable thing? Is love the most valuable thing? What's the most valuable thing? And the answer is your health. Your health is the most valuable thing. You can't replace your health. You can have all the money in the world, and if your time's up, you can't buy yourself another minute. At the end of the day, money can't buy health. And so, what could we control? What could we control? Well, we can control our health. That's, we care about our health because if you're healthy, you can be happy. That's it. Healthy, happy. Why? Because all we need is each other. And if we've got our health and someone else, if I've got me and you, that's all I need. And so we're motivated by staying healthy because that's how we outlast them. That's how we outlast the darkness, right? Because the darkness needs the light to keep going. But if we cut off our supply to the darkness, and we do that by maintaining our light, right? Because they don't feed on our light. They feed on a version of our light that's actually been converted to darkness, right? They feed on disappointment, which is what happens when excitement gets tricked, when happiness gets tricked. And so we have preserved our health. We preserve our health so we can outlast them because they need us. Going back to the dark crystal, they need us to stay alive. And when we take our power back, right, you can't siphon my power anymore because I know what you're up to, which is what I'm going to show you. How they do it. You can't just sort of steal it from me anymore and use it for whatever you want, right? You can't know how cause and effect is going to affect me, right? You can't use neuro-linguistic programming and other psychological tricks to put bad ideas inside my head anymore. And that's the trick, right? That's what's been perpetuated against us this whole time. Because, as you've heard me say now, ad infinitum, darkness truly has no power over light, that which they steal. So they trick us into going against ourselves. And one of the main ways they do that is by convincing us not to trust ourselves, right? Don't listen to yourself. Listen to me. Listen to who we tell you to listen to. So don't trust what you learn through trial and error. Or anecdotal first-hand information. How do I know orbs are true? Because they keep showing up at my house. I'm not asking you, Joe. I'm telling you. And how do I prove it? Because I saw them. They were there with me. That's all the proof I need. When you become an incredibly fascinating human being that, is sovereign and just doing the human thing, stuff happens that these institutions don't want to admit to. You start to uncover the ancient wisdom on your own, through your direct connection with the Creator himself. Why don't I care whether Wes is right or not ultimately, or Billy's right or not? I don't care about either of them. Because I have my own relationship with God. I have my own relationship with Christ. And I get the information I need there. Okay, I don't need to know if he said it in Greek or Hebrew or Sumerian. I don't care what language he said it in. The fact that he said, do unto others as you would have done unto you, is true. I don't care what language he said it in. And so, to me, it's more important that you see what's being perpetrated, okay? So like you just heard me say, I don't care. I mean, I have no particular love. I have no particular feeling at all for Billy Carson. You know, for all I know, he's just as complicit in all this as these other two guys are. It's a show. It's a charade. And I'm saying don't fall for it. And so, you know, in this staged interview between Rogan and Huff, that unfortunately is sort of being like the comment section, it must just be all of Joe Rogan's like sauna bros, you know, from the basement of the Pentagon leaving positive comments on this thing. But it's obviously staged. And this is all about, in my opinion, pointing out and really cementing into the minds of his viewership the inherent pitfalls of being self-taught and how self-taught or being self-taught is inferior to institutional learning. And ultimately the reason why guys like Billy Carson are a threat to society, right? So they're saying Billy Carson is a threat to society, that he's a threat to information because he's self-taught. Okay, this is the bigger point. Okay, this is the third point I was talking about earlier that I promised you we'd get to. The third concept that they're sneaking in, the Trojan horse, is that being self-taught is an inferior way to learn than institutional learning. And as someone who has used his own discernment throughout his life to achieve just about everything I've ever achieved, to become the person I am, I mean, to recover from what I've recovered from, to have the connection I have with my creator, that's cause and effect. That's deduction, by the way. Like, is that you, God? Like, if yes, knock once. If no, knock twice. Like, you have to deduce that shit over time. Okay? So you can't take away from me what I've self-taught myself, right? What my anecdotal experience has taught me. And what is being self-taught also teach you? Like discernment, being perceptive, right? Noticing stuff, trusting your gut. Like when I heard this, I had to sit for 2 days and figure out what bugged me about this interview. And then I've always had beef with guys like this guy. And I had to, just get past all that, these guys that are so pristine, these crackers like this guy. Because I've just always had beef with them, because to me, their life was easier than mine. And whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. That's my, my issues, my baggage that I got over. I meditated on, like, no, it's not that. I mean, he's definitely a cracker. He's definitely got it. But I'm not going to let myself be affected by that. I'm going to sit with this. And I'm going to figure out what's really bugging me about what this guy just did. And it took me a couple days just to get the language together to express it without just flying off the handle and just being irate. And because you can't really articulate yourself when you're pissed off. It doesn't go as well as you might want it to. So I had to collect myself and then sort of put this together. But my feelings, my bullshit detector went off like a Geiger counter in a microwave when I heard this. And so I had to collect myself. And for those of you who didn't know or don't know, the whole Billy Carson subplot is that this Huff guy, Wes Huff, embarrassed Carson on a live stream. And this came up, or this was called into question, because based on Carson suggesting that he can speak ancient Sumerian, right? And according to Huff, nobody can speak ancient Sumerian. And so I knew Carson was lying, and I had to debunk him once he said that. But what he's really, going after, I think, is Carson's character in the fact that Carson is self-taught. And so let this be a warning, right, to everyone out there who's self-taught. Like, don't go thinking for yourself now. Let the institution tell you how to think. Let's spend the next 7 minutes or so reviewing this clip, and let's see if you see what I see.
Too.
Yeah.
Especially script. Like if cursive is very beautiful. But that is...
Hang on. I know we just started, but Joe, cursive is beautiful. See, there's one. That's just a quick one. That's just a little orb, right? That's just a little... But we all know what cursive is, do we not? And just in case you don't, cursive is a form. And in case you didn't see the Leroy Horton interview...
All the little kids that have been born since 1999 aren't supposed to be born on a birth certificate system. And the birth certificate system itself, when we looked at that, was one of the most nefarious pieces of the Empire of the Three City-States warfare platform to capture everybody as peasants or serfs or chattel property. And when we sat back and took a good look at the birth certificate system, when you're born on this planet and your mother has you in her arms in the hospital, when you're first born, the RN comes in the room and says, hey, you need to sign this birth certificate before you can leave the hospital with the baby, or you can't leave with the baby. Well, that's a lie. You're trying to tell me I can't leave the hospital with my child unless I sign this document, this birth certificate document? That's kidnapping. That's illegal. You can't take my baby from me and hold my baby just because I don't sign your document. That's crazy. So what we found out was that the baby's name is all in capital letters on the birth certificate. And when your mom signs that thing, she signs in cursive, which is considered necromancy, communication with the dead. Well, the only place you find all capital letters in anyone's name is on a tombstone. That's the only place you're supposed to find it. You're a dead entity. Well, when you're born into this world, you're considered a dead entity due to the shipping war that we're all in. So you're automatically, when she signs that document, and everybody signs in cursive, she's conducting necromancy, communicating with the dead. And when you're legged into that massive corporate construct of the Empire of the Three City-States, you're automatically presumed missing, dead, or presumed lost at sea.
Cursive is a form of necromancy.
It's so fascinating because obviously coming from a point of ignorance, the letters look so similar. Like so many of this is the what I always got about cuneiform. When I look at that, I'm like, it's just one particular sort of character that's this way and that way and up and down. And
cuneiform is wild.
Weird.
It's really, really tricky. And that's the thing when, if you're studying ancient languages and you start to study Greek, the Greek alphabet is similar enough that you're like, okay, alpha looks like an A, right? Delta looks like a D. So you can figure it out.
Okay, and here's some of the predictive programming, right? This guy's a linguist, and he's already starting to plant the seeds, right? Phonetics, right? Phonetics don't work. Like, I taught myself Greek, so I'm smart enough to teach myself Greek, okay? But phonetics, which is the equivalent of being like you use your ear. That's what phonetics are. You use your ear. That's how I taught myself how to play guitar, right? I used my ear to teach myself how to play guitar. And so he's going after phonetics already.
Out. And so it tricks you because you start off and you're like, oh, this is phobios, fear. I know what a phobia is. And you get this false sense of encouragement. And then, the further you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, I'm screwed. So, but Hebrew is completely the opposite because the writing system is so different. The learning curve is hard at the beginning, and then you're like, everything is just 3 letters with a suffix added to it. And so it feels like, whereas the opposite is true with Greek. Greek, you're like, I get this. And then when you really go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, crap. None of the things that I learned about that are supposed to be standard, all of them have exceptions.
Wow.
But cuneiform's a wild one.
Do you know who Rick Strassman is?
No.
He's a scholar, and he did a lot of early work, FDA-approved work on psychedelic.
FDA-approved work? There you go. Thank you for the FDA stamp of approval on psychedelic work, Joe. Thank you. Again, okay? Trust the institution, right? This is about the institution being right. FDA approved. It's the same FDA that approved other things too, right, Joe? They've approved some other things too that begin with emergency use, if you know what I'm saying.
And he spent 16 years teaching himself to read ancient Hebrew.
Nice.
Yeah, so because he wanted to really understand the Bible from the original source of ancient Hebrew and to understand it in context. Because ancient Hebrew, the way the words are structured, is so different than English, and that something must be lost in translation. So he spent 16 years teaching himself how to read ancient Hebrew.
You hear how condescending he sounds over there? Like, yeah, wow. He's just waiting. He's just waiting to drop the hammer, and here it comes.
Hebrew. I was like, that is that is such dedication. 16 years.
It's a long time. That seems too long.
Well, you're self-taught. I mean, he's doing it himself.
Yeah. Self-teaching. Yeah. I self-taught myself Greek at first, and then when I started learning it formally, I realized how much.
Learning it formally? Self-taught? Man. What else, right? What other shame is tied up in being self-taught versus having the institutional knowledge? Well, being poor, right? Like if you had to teach yourself stuff, it's because you couldn't afford a formal education. That's in there, and I'm not really as susceptible to that because I've been on both sides of that throughout my life. Like if anyone ever wanted to sit down and interview me and ask me my life story, like you can find out all about it. But
you miss when you self-teach yourself.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, how many people can teach you ancient Hebrew? How many courses are available?
Oh, you can take it at any graduate college.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And is it, it's not something that we know what it sounded like, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big debate with ancient languages.
Right.
And this is actually incredible. Like, I can't believe this is where he goes on to basically tell the people of Greece that they don't know how to pronounce their own language. I love this guy. He's awesome. He is, have a listen.
Same thing with, arguably we don't know how any of this was pronounced.
Right.
I mean, modern Greek speakers get really mad at me when I say that because they're like, of course we know how it's pronounced. It's pronounced like we pronounce it, right? And
modern Greek speakers. Okay. He just disenfranchised everybody who speaks Greek from their own language by calling them modern Greek speakers. You mean people who speak Greek? You mean Greeks? Oh, you mean Greeks? Oh, okay. Modern Greek speakers. Gotcha.
And on all my videos where I'm like site translating Greek manuscripts, there's so many comments of modern Greek speakers getting mad at how I'm pronouncing things. But realistically, we don't really know how most of the things are pronounced with anything.
But isn't that very bizarre when you're translate? Like if you go back to like say the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Here we go.
We don't even know what the words sounded like.
Yeah, so the point of contention between Huff and Carson surrounded on the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I can't even, just as a point, like I can't even think of the phrase Epic of Gilgamesh without thinking of Billy Carson at this point. It's so synonymous with him. So, yeah, who knows? Carson might be in on it too. He's done his own version of neurolinguistic programming us at this point.
We kind of know what they represent, and then we do a literal translation of what they represent. But if you've never heard, no one can speak ancient Sumerian.
Yeah. Well, Sumerian's a wild one because it's a language isolate.
What does that mean?
So Hebrew is an Afro-Semitic language. So Hebrew is related to all of these other languages.
That was for you, Billy. He managed to squeeze in Afro-Semitic. That was for you, Billy.
Languages like Aramaic and Akkadian, but language isolates have no adjacent comparisons.
Whoa.
So
language isolates, not anguage isolates.
So because I tried to teach myself Sumerian and I failed and I just gave up because I couldn't do it because I had nothing to really compare it to.
Right.
So Sumeriologists are very like, they're a field of their own because I learned a little bit of Akkadian because I had studied Semitic languages, and there's enough crossover between things like Hebrew and Aramaic and Akkadian, but Sumerian you have nothing to compare it to.
And so, what did it eventually become? It just died. It just died. It just died. How? Do we know? I mean, the Sumerians lost to the Assyrians, and the Assyrians got taken over by the Babylonians. I mean, it's just the course of history where things happen. But there are a number of ancient languages that are language isolates, like linear Elamite. We had no idea what linear Elamite even said until 2021.
Oh, I never even heard it until 5 seconds ago.
I know, there you go. Jamie, if you pull up, if you look up, what's it called? There's a cup, a silver cup. It'll come up if you Google image linear Elamite, because you think cuneiform looks wild. Linear Elamite is completely different than that too. And there's a silver cup, which we had no idea what it said, and then a bunch of researchers, ancient Near Eastern researchers, developed what. So let's, in the corner there, that one on
Far left corner?
Oh, no, here, now it's moved because you clicked it. That one, yeah, click that. So that's linear Elamite. And so that's in and around the same time that languages like Sumerian. So there's this very interesting kind of, if we're talking about a story in the Bible like the Tower of Babel, where it says that God confused their languages, and everybody started speaking different languages, you have these languages that just pop up and out of nowhere and have no relation to one another. So Akkadian starts to adopt certain words in Sumerian, but they're still Sumerian words. It's like pizza is Italian, right? Or like kayak is Inuit. But when you're looking at the words that carry over, it's not because there's a relationship between Akkadian and Sumerian. It's because you have these cultures that live side by side. And eventually, Akkadian starts to adopt
these things. But Sumerian is... So that's why when I see people like Billy Carson talk about being able to read Sumerian, I'm like, dude, I read ancient languages and I can't... I've tried and I can't make heads or tails of Sumerian.
Yeah.
So...
That's a tell.
Unfortunately, it kind of gives away.
Listen, I like Billy. He was a nice guy. I really enjoyed talking.
This is so condescending. Like, I'm sorry, Bill, that even if you are just a character in the movie, that this is how your character had to go out. This is just so uncool. I mean, this is not very Christian. I mean, it's so condescending.
To him, I really do. I think his videos are fun, but I also think truth is important.
I have no problem with him as an individual.
He just needs to course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, course correct and recognize what you know and what you don't know, and that you're not doing people a service, especially people like myself that aren't educated in this. Like we turn to others who claim to have a vast knowledge of this to help me out. Tell me what's going on. When I sit down and talk to you, tell me what's going on.
So there it was, folks. There it was. Billy Carson's character assassinated on the Joe Rogan show. And it was not even the primary modus operandi. It was secondary. That was the Trojan horse, right? What really died, right? So what died along with Carson's reputation is being self-taught, right? You can't teach yourself ancient Sumerian. I mean, Wes said so, and he knows everything else, right? That's basically what this was all about. Like, this guy knows everything else except how to teach himself ancient Sumerian, because you can't teach yourself that. You have to learn that from someone else. You have to go to an institution to get that information. And so Billy Carson's dangerous to society, and so is being self-taught, right? That's what we're left with in the wake of this, this clown show, right? And so the entire concept of being self-educated, of critical thinking, of learning through observation, right, of using the faculty of the mind itself to solve a problem, right, of using the faculty of the mind to itself to solve a problem rather than just asking Grok to write it for you, right? And this is why guys who do this, right, who memorize everything and move to the front of the class because they memorized everything, right? You're not thinking, you're being indoctrinated, right? They're not teaching you how to think, they're teaching you what to think. And so the fact that you can parrot this information better than anyone else, it doesn't impress me. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to memorize all this stuff. I'm not saying it's easy to learn a language. What he's done is, was not easy, okay? But what I am saying is that what he memorized is something that someone else figured out, and then he just memorized it. He's not really doing any of the thinking. He's memorizing stuff and then, being the thought police and then getting Billy Carson's character assassinated and then being a shill for sort of, raining on people who are self-taught, who do have critical thinking skills, who can use the framework of their own mind to solve a problem. And this is what they don't want us doing, right? This is what Project Mockingbird looks like, right? This is what indoctrination looks like, right? This is how it's being used as a tool by state intelligence, right? To manage the images of characters on the world stage, right? To release disclosures and controlled narratives, right? Counter narratives that manipulate the minds of millions. That's how they do it. Right? The MSM went under controlled demolition years ago to herd its viewers into other forms of media, which can be further surveilled and tracked. But the owners never changed, and the goal remained the same as always: control the population. And so for those of you who think that this interview was a step in the right direction for Christianity, I disagree. What we learned was what the expensive institutions told him to say. And this isn't very Christ-like, in my opinion. This isn't what my Jesus would do. So I see this as two shills, two Fed boys, using shame and coercion to manage the image of certain characters on the world stage as part of a controlled narrative and counter-narrative charade being played out on his show. So anyone whose consciousness is quadrupled over the past 6 years, who never took the government's health advice, right? Who have actually been an instrument in the takedown of the global darkness, who've always trusted their inner knowing and their own sense of discernment over the suggestions of the thought police, fact checkers, and captured operations like this show. We should find this charade infuriating, right? Their arrogance, infuriating. And the fact that they're trying to silence critical thinking yet again in this insidious way, this Trojan horse, while snickering over the grave of Billy Carson's character on the air, is all you really need to know about these two individuals, if you ask me. It's all you need to know. So believing in our own power, right? Believing in our own vision and our own direction, in our own true north. This is what they're constantly trying to attack. This is what they're constantly trying to take away from us, right? You have to get away with everything good on planet Earth. Every common sense good thing, right? You have to get away with it because you're not allowed to have a good time, a really good time. They come after you if you're harvesting rainwater, right? They come after you if you're drinking raw milk. They come after you if you're growing tomatoes in your backyard and raising chickens, right? That's a good time. Let me off the wheel. Just let me off the wheel. And I'll take it from there. Because we don't need much to be happy, right? We are human beings. We've got it better than just about anything in the universe. And this is why they couldn't help themselves. The fallen. This is why they had to stop doing their jobs and join us, because being human is so much fun. That's why they keep trying to take it away from us. That's why they got bitter. That's why they've been stealing it for as long as we can remember. That's why, to them, seeing us disappointed is all the joy they need. Because it's so good to be alive. We've just forgotten that. But we're remembering. But it feels so good to be alive, to be a human. And so that's why they've been stealing it. Because being us is great. It's fun. And this is why they steal everything, because they can't experience what we experience. And so the closest thing they get to it, experiencing it, is stealing it. The closest thing they can get is witnessing our disappointment when they take it from us. And that's the truth. And so the solution, as always, is to invert the inversion. So what must we do? Well, we can't let them steal it anymore. We can't let them steal our joy. We can't let them steal our happiness, and we can't let them take away our sense of humor, right? We can't let them take away our ability to make fun of each other at each other's expense. I personally enjoy being made fun of. If it's done well. Why do people enjoy getting roasted? I don't know. Why would Donald Trump show up for his own roast? Well, because when you get roasted, you're being seen, right? If people can tell jokes about you, it means they know you. It means they've been paying attention. And it means most likely that they envy you, because if people are paying attention to you, it also means they're envying you, generally. And so as a result of paying attention to you and envying what they see, they want to talk smack about you as they aspire to being you. I mean, this is the paradox of being human. I mean, nobody said it made any sense, but this is the way it works. And so that's what roasts are about. A roast is, I like you, but screw you, man. I love your life, but screw you. That's a roast. And so people love to be made fun of because that means that we're being seen. And that's why they're taking it from us, because that's a great way to see someone else, right? And that's what being human is. That's what's enviable about being human is laughter, right? Because we both laugh at those jokes. I mean, Trump's laughing just as hard as whoever's roasting him. Like, I can't believe you know me this well. Like, wow, that's so fucking funny. And collectively, we haven't been doing much laughing lately. Like, a lot of the really good comedians had to go underground, like the funny comedians, not fake comedians, who are using being a comedian as a cover for being a shill, right? Not who tell funny jokes, right? I mean, the funniest thing about Rogan's act is Rogan. He's not funny. His jokes aren't funny. He's up there playing a comedian so that can be his cover. Like, bro, like, you're not a comedian. You're not funny. You're funny looking, but your jokes aren't funny. Oh, yeah, remember, you got super famous being the MC for Fear Factor, right? You've been part of the group the whole time. You were just like the rebel part of the group, but you were still part of the group, and you've always been playing that part, right? The renegade. But you're not a renegade. You're not a renegade. And so when you put two and two together and you start to realize that the funniest thing about Joe Rogan's act is Joe Rogan, right? The fact that he's like this hobbit. He's a joke-telling hobbit up there. And his jokes aren't funny, right? Like, they got written down in the basement of the Pentagon with him and his buddies. Probably Vince McMahon, if you ask me. Vince McMahon, I think, is writing all of this. This reads like a WWF script, does it not? And we all know, that your boy right here, DJT, like, he was in WrestleMania. I believe he had a chair smacked across the back of his neck at one point. Like, he knows Vince, and he's been saying central casting quite a bit. And so if I had to guess, I would say this is all being written by Vince McMahon. But the jokes are definitely being written in the basement of the Pentagon, for those Joe Rogan stand-up comedy routines. And so when, you realize this, you realize that they really do want to see it taken from us. It really is just watching our ability to communicate openly and to be sort of intimate and transparent with each other and just say, talk about what we see. Like, back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, like, we would have competitions where we would bust on each other. Like, we would literally have competitions to see who could insult each other the hardest. And so what we were doing was we were insulting each other purely based on, like, the other's appearance. And so if you had any sort of weakness about anything, like, it got exposed right there in the cafeteria in front of the whole school before school started. I mean, there were hundreds of people around, and you were just getting, eviscerated. Like, I got my ass handed to me. There was this kid named Buki. He could talk so much shit, and he just embarrassed me every day. He loved it. And he was only like 65 pounds. And he's also the first guy to punch me in the eye before I even knew what, like, he punched me in the eye so fast. So Buki just taught me a whole lot back then in these competitions where we would bust on each other. And again, busting is a euphemism for I'm going to insult the shit out of you. I'm going to insult what I'm looking at and what I can perceive based on what I see here. And I'm going to tell jokes about how poor you are, right? Or how your mom must have been an alcoholic for letting you show up for school like that. Like, that's the kind of stuff Buki used to say to me. That's how we used to bust on each other. But what is good about all this, what's behind all this is that we're paying attention. Like, Buki knew me well. Like, he loved paying attention to me. He loved pointing out what a cracker I was, wearing like pink shorts and like light blue Madras shirts and stuff. Like, he loved calling me a cracker. And to his credit, he saw me very well. And as someone who has been run into in the grocery store more times than I can count, I can say with a lot of certainty that people don't see each other. People don't see each other anymore. We're not looking at each other anymore. But when you bust on someone, like when I call out Joe Rogan, because the funniest part of his act is the way he looks on stage telling jokes, it's because I'm paying attention to him, right? And so there is good. Like, we do pay attention more closely. We scrutinize when we have something we want to say about someone. Like, this is why I made this presentation where I can point out how Project Mockingbird is deployed on us in these sort of down-to-earth dude podcasts, right, that are actually state intelligence-run psyops, focus groups. And, that's what connection used to look like, right? And so when they've taken that, they've also taken our ability to connect, right? We can sort of make difficult situations bearable. We can be transparent and compassionate with humor. I got bad news, but at least it's going to be funny when I tell it to you, right? That's human connection. And I don't think that's necessarily how we go forward. I think, comedy or humor is sort of it's a defense mechanism to a certain extent. But until we get to a point where we don't need those defense mechanisms to be honest with each other, like, they're a crutch, they're a cast, they're there to brace us until we can just be transparent. Like I am on this show. Like, I'm very transparent and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Like, just turn it off if it makes you that uncomfortable. And so what's behind the concept of making fun is I see you, right? I see you. We're both the embodiment of creation. And as such, we can just be intimate for a minute. And there doesn't need to be any pretense. I can just ask, what's up with you? And, this is how this gets taken from us. Like, we can't talk about the truth. And if you just came up with that on your own, like, it's not valid. Like, did you learn that from an institution? Like, well, it doesn't count. And that's why the fact that he's always, Joe Rogan's always saying, prove it, pisses me off. Well, this is how I feel. That's all the proof I need, right? And if you're going to tell me to prove the way I feel, then I'm not going to dare be intimate with you. In fact, I'm going to put up a smoke screen so thick that you have no idea who I am at that point. And that's how we lose one another. And so we have to do the opposite of that. We have to have respect for the fact that we're making it through this reality, right? That we are divine creation, making it through this holographic hall of mirrors, right? This human existence, the gravity of this human existence is actually what binds us, right? Because we're all getting through the gravity, the heaviness, right? This density together, right? The density of gravity is just so much. If you think about it, that's a lot of ether, right? That is a lot of ether. And we're getting through it. This is power. The ether of gravity is powerful enough to turn back time, and we're getting through that together. And that's enough, right? That is enough to bind us. That and your Momma Jokes, that's enough. We don't need to be chasing, what Andrew Tate tells us to chase. We don't need to be chasing what Dana White tells us to chase. Like, we don't have to all become millionaires or else. Like, we're not trying to be top G. Andrew Tate's dad was in the CIA. Like, we're not supposed to put 2 and 2 together. Like, give me a break, man. Sheesh. You know, I do think these days of being separate are coming to an end. You know, like I started all this with, and this is my primary message, right? Is that the motivations are shifting, right? First, the gaps between us are closing. The gaps between us and ourselves are closing. We're reconnecting to ourselves, and then we're reconnecting to each other. And what we realize, right, as we get closer and closer to each other, is that the motivations shift. We're no longer motivated by the same things because our needs are being met in a way beyond our imagination when we have peace, right? When we have humility and when we have each other and our health. You know, we rediscover our humanness. And when we rediscover our humanness, we rediscover each other and how much joy there is just, you know, in between people having a real conversation. Just sort of unafraid and open-heartedly connecting. Nothing compares to that. And so this materialism falls by the wayside, right? You know, we stop putting our focus in these black cubes, right? These black boxes that they want us to put all our attention in. The cube, right? The black box that they want us to focus on. And so we don't do that anymore. And what we start to learn as we recover is that, you know, as we set our hearts free and reconnect with each other, as we reconnect to our own hearts, right? As we set our hearts free, the covetous nature of the human existence dissolves. Like, again, at the beginning, you heard me say, like, everything I wanted shifted. Right? My vision board went from the vision board, you know, of a confused young man trying, you know, and mixed with the selfish desires of a young boy. It evolved out of that to a sovereign man that wants what's best for people, you know, for humanity, who wants what's best for humanity. My motivations shifted from being that of getting things to, you know, my core values manifesting in reality. I want to see more peace. I want to see more happiness. I want to see more health, wealth, solidarity, fun, right? Freedom, peace, health, all the fun things. And so as the motivations, right, that drive this sort of egregiously material nature of reality dissolve, as these material motivations dissolve, hopefully so too will the need for striving, right? And the need for selling our time here on earth at all. Because this is an incredible reality. That's why they've got us on the wheel. That's why we're getting pissed. And we want our time back. You know, we want to stop trading our time for money. We know that's not the way it's supposed to be. We know it doesn't need to be that way either. We know. And why this is being prolonged is actually starting to get a little tedious. We are natural human beings alive in this incredible reality, and we need to stop selling our time for money. We're alive, right? We're humans, and we have living to do. We have to live here. We have to rediscover what it means to live free on our planet, right? We've got to be human. We can't pursue materialism anymore. Materialism can no longer siphon any more of our time and energy and essence than it already has, because we've got living to do. Anyway, I think that's enough for now, don't you? That ends my transmission. I hope it helped. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you next time.